think we've made him wait just about long enough. What's up, y'all? Hey, Neo.
Hey, Con, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. MLUT Week 4 show here. Delayed a little bit between work on our parts, weather on our parts. I mean, you know, we had the Snowpocalypse 4.0 hitting the East Coast. I think we had Linoleum out of power for something like 3 or 4 days. So, had a lot of things going on. I even had jury duty yesterday, just for good measure. But now we're going to pick this up.
Busy myself.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, a lot going on, so we're going to pick this back up a couple days later than usual. Cover a little bit about what's been going on. So far, we'll just jump right into the matches. I mean, Week 3 matches, we've only had one played so far. I know we have some others that are kind of getting worked on, being scheduled possibly for this weekend. Week 3 was a match that I casted because you played in. And that was the Hot Snakes versus Sassy, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Kind of a interesting. I don't even know really how this match got scheduled. It was kind of weird. It sounded like Zios thought Facial knew the match was going on Sunday, but Facial didn't know. So right at the last second, Staw was going to go ahead and play for us. Facial shows up at the last second because Ark's calling him, and I'm sending him messages on WhatsApp. He was making dinner with his wife, so kind of interesting how this one got scheduled. It's kind of another week where matches just kind of happen, so it's interesting.
Yeah, luckily, I think I was scrambling to get home from work, if I recall, and I happened to make it in time. But yeah, we managed to get that one done. And the only match played so far this week, and really, I wasn't surprised by Sassy's map pick. They picked Mall, if I recall, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then Hot Snakes picking Vault City. We've talked about it over and over. Sassy being a team that's very well-rounded, it's kind of hard to choose against them. Do you know if there was any particular, specific reason for choosing Vault City against them, or if it was more just, kind of what you guys were feeling at the time?
We kind of talked about it for a second. Honestly, after Mall, which we can get into in a minute, nobody was really wanting to play that much. We got pretty much raped. So, but we were sitting there talking. No one was really enthusiastic. It was actually my idea. I said Vault City. Reason for that, mostly, I think, was we know that Fusion plays a really, really good defense on that map, and I think it's his favorite map, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that's that's true.
And after just playing his least favorite map in Mall, if I'm not mistaken on that as well, I kind of put out there Vault City. I figured Fusion would play a good defense. I'm trying to remember exactly what we started out with positions. I'm pretty sure we switched something up during. But that was kind of our thinking on that was Fusion. I think Fusion and Facial were already a little bit, morale was down a little bit based on some of the things that happened in Mall. And so I was hoping that our team would bring up morale a little bit to have like Fusion playing his favorite map and whatnot with that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of figured. I know a lot of players. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of sentiment one way or the other on Vault City. I think a lot of people think it's okay. Some flag runners like it because of the complexity in the bases, but I know Fusion in particular has been someone who has really been liking that map. So I figured that he was a big reason for choosing that map. A lot of times, one of your high salary guys has a favorite map choice. You're pretty much guaranteed to play that at some point during the season. So not surprising to see that one come out. And Zeos, Team Sassy again won both maps, which actually puts them now in sole possession of first place. I can pop up these standings actually.
Yeah, definitely. If I'm not mistaken, it's going to show them now. They should have 12 points, which is going to tie for Hot Snakes. But just remember there that our 12 points comes through three different matches. So we've played 6 maps. They've only played 4, as they have not lost a map yet.
Right, like we say, you can see down there on the stream, you get 3 points for a map win, 1 point for a map loss. So Sassy, well on their way, jumping out to the lead. Of course, they've still got a few matches left to play because they had a bye week 1, I believe. And that's why they've got a couple fewer maps played.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something we saw here, I think a lot of people would have said before this last week that Orange probably is a better player than Mintek, I would think. Mintek actually played this week as Orange was unable to show up. And one thing we had said before in a different cast was that while Zios team, their top 5 is probably the best on paper. Very, very good team. That of Zios, Chowie, Danny, Ganja, and Orange. Mintek was able to play for Orange as Orange wasn't able to show up, and Mintek played really, really well. If I'm not mistaken, I've heard him as an 800-plus player in UT99. So now that I think he's maybe more familiar with some of the maps, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, but now that he's, you know, kind of gotten more better at some of these maps, he played really, really well against us.
Yeah, I think Mintek was one of those guys that, I mean, he had been active leading up to the season, and then, I don't know, he seems to be, to go through periods of activity and inactivity as far as pickup games are concerned. I don't know, you know, what that means as far as his actual activity, whether he's been scrimming, whether he's been around, and so I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of the captains didn't look at him as a potentially, you know, higher salary or high round pick, was because of the fact that there were those question marks about activity. But I think that, yeah, I mean, once you see him play, I don't think his skill level is that big of a drop off. But I think there's always been that sort of, especially in the draft, there'd been that sort of question mark about activity, and I think that's one of the reasons that you saw him slip so far, was because he was one of those guys where captain said, well, if he shows up and plays, then yeah, he'll be a pretty solid pick, but will he? And you know, that was sort of my question too. Was he's one of those guys that I hadn't seen for a whole lot lately playing in pickup games, but then of course he showed up in the match and, like you said, was able to fill in.
Right, and I hope I'm not mixing people up there, but he is a 99 player. Is that correct?
I believe so. I know so. I don't know why I'm hesitating on that one. And another thing that affected the game was DC. Excuse me. That is the wrong note that I have there. Ha. Yep. Ignore that. Ignore that note. So so we're looking in. I mean, that was the only week 3 map that was played, or match that was played. So let's look ahead to these other matches.
Well, really quick, were you? I don't know if you were going to talk about. Did you say a DC, a disconnect?
You know what? That's a better segue. Yeah, we'll go into that. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, right on. Well, what I was going to say about that, what happened on Maul during that match, and before I even get into this, I still don't think we would have won this either map, to be truly honest with this, but during Maul, we actually went up by 1 cap really, really early within the first couple minutes, and Facial actually disconnected. And it was one of those situations where there was so much going on that the other team didn't even notice that he had dropped. And unfortunately, what happened is the other team, that being Zios' team, was actually able to cap, and they were on another run while Facial was reconnecting. So it's kind of a power play, and unfortunately with that, it's one of those situations where our team honestly should have obviously said something, we should have typed something, but we just thought that they saw it. And so we didn't, because we're scrambling around trying to get, you know, the flag back, etc. And so all of a sudden, you know, Facial got back, they had capped, they had tied it, they were on another run, and really, at least I know Facial, it affected Facial's game quite a bit that night. So I don't know that we would have won either map anyway, but I don't know how much that changed team morale, and if, you know, it could have looked maybe at least closer as a match.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember casting that, and I remember not actually noticing until after that cap happened that it was even 5-on-4. And that was, you know, as us casting, because certainly when you're in a game too, you know, that's sort of the catch-22 you're at. Is it's like, well, do you stop what you're doing and then say something, or do you, you know, what do you do, because you're sort of giving up your playing ability to try to you know, alleviate the situation, but at the same time, you know, you're being idle for it. So that's why I know we've talked about. There's been some talk in the UT Comps ETF development, trying to figure out ways to solve that. There's a few different options for it. I think someone had said that Europeans actually use a mod that is standalone and just automatically pauses if someone drops or something along those lines. I don't know if you've heard anything about that one.
Yeah, I think I had heard in UT99 that they had something like that, where if somebody dropped, it would automatically pause. And I know that we've also had talk of having, you know, well, first of all, we need to have an admin in there if somebody were to drop. That being said, I just talked to Linoleum earlier tonight, and I'm actually now an admin on the Mlut, so I'll be able to watch more games and I'll be able to pause it. And then the other thing that you had talked about was possibly implementing like one timeout per team, like a 3-minute timeout in case somebody dropped as well.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk between IRC and WhatsApp, and just people sort of philosophizing on the forums and TeamSpeak about different ways. Since we've got this new project we're working on, this UT Comp CTF thing. I say we, that Dark Virus and DC are working on, but they're taking a lot of input from different directions and sort of throwing around ideas and figuring little ways to fix these little things that we've had for a while. And one possibility has been to give each team basically a single timeout to use per game. I want to say that you can do that if you're in coach mode in UT Comp already, but of course most of our games don't end up having an extra person around a coach, and if you did have a person around a coach, they could jump in for a disconnected sub anyway. So that's sort of a self-defeating or solving problem there, where it's a moot point at that in that situation. But
yeah, definitely.
But there's been talk about trying to give each team a single, like say arbitrarily 3-minute long timeout, because what that would do is that would allow them to take care of things like a single disconnect or someone's power flashes or something. It would give them enough time to get back into the game without necessarily having it be something that can be abused, or even not necessarily intentionally abused. But I mean, the example I gave the other day was with all this weather we've had, say someone's in the middle of a match, their power goes out and doesn't come back on for 2 or 3 days. Well, you're not going to sit there with the match pause for 2 or 3 days. Obviously, at some point you have to decide. You have to draw a line. And I think that if you had a built-in hard-coded time limit, then that would just take all the discussion out of it. There wouldn't be any argument over, well, let me get an admin and how long is too long and what's fair and all that. And someone else has to go because they have to wake up and early for work, and that's why they scheduled it this time and blah blah blah. And that's one of the reasons why I've been a proponent of a specific time limit, is so that you just take all that subjectivity out of the question. In worst case scenario, if one team drops and their guy can't get back in 3 minutes, and he's on his way, the other team can elect to use their timeout to add another 3 minutes if they want to be doing him a favor for that. So I would say, look, if you can't get your disconnect back within 3 to 6 minutes, then you should basically be playing 5-on-4 at that point, because if you can't get a sub, you can only force the other team to wait around so long before at some point you should have to suffer, is my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, and I know, like, a team like ours, for instance, if that were to happen where, they use a timeout and we use a timeout, let's say they dropped a player, honestly, I'm certain that our team would probably just say, all right, let's finish out the map 4v4. I mean, I just think, in a draft league where this is really to have fun and be competitive and bring more people to the community, I mean, I think that, I know some teams might elect to play the 5v4, but I think we would just be like, all right, let's play 4v4, let's get this played, let's have some fun, so.
You obviously don't bet on these games.
Obviously, I don't have a bookie, so.
Yeah, I'm afraid that might affect the lines, and we'll see what Vegas thinks about that. Well, that covers actually a little bit of that. I might as well just continue on with this UT Comp CTF updating, because I know we did have another little sort of milestone the other day. We had a live server. I know DV and DC have both had various levels of testing that have been going on. They actually had a couple of us join a live server and had multiple people jumping around in it. And so the scoreboard stats sort of version 1.0 or maybe 0.1, whatever you want to call it, they're basically in place. And so if anyone's wondering sort of how development is going on that, it's coming along. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen covers and seals and all that kind of sort of working. There's like I said, it's an early prototype. There's still lots of little things to work out, but it's definitely coming along. It definitely is existing and progressing, and it's not surprising that we won't really have time, I think, to use it any time during this MLUT season, but it'll be something we can start using maybe. I'm guessing what's going to happen is we're going to have a test pug server. Elect to have one of the IPs just run that, like, sort of beta prototype of the new version of UT Comp, and just say, hey, if you guys want to use it for pugs, go ahead and jump in there. Just be aware that there might be issues. And I imagine that later on down the line, as it gets ready for sort of live testing, that's what we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting and exciting at the same time. I saw a couple of the screenshots on WhatsApp. It's pretty cool. And then I saw Dark Virus. I was reading him talk about seals and covers and stuff like that. And it's pretty intense. Kind of some of the stuff that he was taking into consideration for those two, you know, the seals and the covers. It looks like it's going to be kind of a pain in the ass, but I'm really happy to have two people, you know, working on that right now.
Well, and to clarify a little bit, I know that we were looking this up, just having our philosophical discussions, and, you know, again, me giving a lot of input on this, just so they have one more thought to consider. We did some digging into the Smart CTF mod for, I believe, both UTU-99 and the one that Wink worked on for 2K4, and I believe he's integrating some of that code directly, or sort of translating that into the new UT Comp CTF sort of amalgamation. And that's where some of these ideas for covers and seals basically started and then are being tweaked from. And for those who don't know, basically the idea behind a seal, that's fairly simple. It's your flag is home, your flag carrier with enemy flag is on your side of the map, and then any kills that you get in your side of the map are considered a seal. So in theory, you know, you're in your base, so to speak, or more or less, yeah, in your base. You're past mid, hopefully. And it bases all this on the name of the zones. So ultimately, it may require tweaking of the names of certain zones and maps, but we'll sort of cross that bridge when we get to it, I think. But that's the theory behind it: is your flag home, you're in your own side of the map, and your flag carrier's in your side of the map. And any kill you get that satisfies all those criteria will be considered a seal. I think the enemy might have to be in your side of the map as well. I'm not positive on that. Probably does. Cover's a little more complicated, and this is, you know, one of those things, because what do you consider a cover kill? It's a little more sort of subjective, and so that's the one that gets a little complicated. Because you get a few different things, such as if you're near your flag carrier, or if the person you kill is near your flag carrier, or if the person you kill has direct line of sight to your flag carrier. And I think there's one or two other specific situations, but the general idea is trying to determine whether or not someone is a threat to your flag carrier when you get that kill. So basically, like, every kill on Maul would probably count as a cover kill.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was kind of saying it just sounds like kind of a pain in the ass, because figuring out all that and then putting into the code on top of it. I mean, once again, just thank you to DC and Dark Virus for taking this on.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that some of these statistics aren't so much going to be... Like, I don't think you're going to look at one of these statistics and say, oh man, you know, look how many cover kills you got. But it'll be something kind of fun to look at, a little more interesting than just looking at the frags and deaths counts. And it'll also give us, you know, something to sort of compare between players, and especially between teams. And maybe we'll find some more information, you know, in looking at those. And I mean, the thing that I'm personally most excited about is seeing the team stats. Like, he's already got integrated team stats for flag possession and pickups. So in other words, rather than just having to scroll through each individual person and see how many pickups they got, it'll automatically show how the split goes between the teams. So if one team is dominating, you know, the amps on, say, Grindel Keep, you'll actually be able to see that on the scoreboard immediately. And things like that are going to be very interesting for getting more in-depth into the analytics of how different teams are playing and why one team lost and one team won, as opposed to simply looking at the caps and then trying to, you know, derive information from their nets and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't wait to see how it looks. I've only seen it on that WhatsApp app, but I want to see it in action. So next time you go to test it, I want to check it out.
Yeah, we'll see as they get different updates. I don't know how, you know, if they have like a permanent server up they've been testing on, or what the case was. I know there is still a bunch of issues with it, things like, you know, errors popping up, causing your ping to show wrong, and, you know, causing you to get 12 frames per second when the scoreboard was up. So they're definitely early beta, but it's something it's nice to see progressing. It's nice to see Wild, you know, able to be tested. But yeah, that's sort of the update on that. I think every week we're gonna have a little bit more to talk about with it, and that's what we're seeing right now. So I guess that'd be a good time to go into our predictions. We have a lot of predictions here, simply because we have week 3 and week 4 to go over.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the Mlut site right now.
Yeah, we're
something just to kind of mention, I guess, really quick, if you don't mind, right before you talk about that, something that just happened in the IRC channel. I guess Zyos was a captain. He was going to log into FTP. He was messing with something. He actually didn't. It was his turn to pick. Didn't pick. Got kicked out of the pug, and everybody's like, come on now, Neo, enforce the 24-hour ban. It was clearly a mistake. Obviously, he's not going to get banned for that, the 24-hour ban. But that is something just to know that you guys need to know, please. I'm now also an admin in there, and if you are doing the pretend AFK where you're not picking you're not picking because you got rando captained, just ask somebody. There's 9 other people in the pug. People know who you should pick. But yeah, just you know, don't be doing the pretend thing. You will get it. Well, I think we're gonna do a 12-hour ban if I'm not mistaken, not 24-hour. Because if it's a 24-hour ban, let's say it's the last pug of the night, you could actually get kicked out of 2 nights of pugging. So I think it's gonna be a 12-hour ban. But just realize, you know, if you need help picking, or you know, some people are just like, hey, I'll join if I get captained. Will somebody captain for me? That just happened in this one, and somebody was like, yeah. So you can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, it's usually pretty easy to pick 1 or 2, you know, players, and then just ask their opinion on it at the very least. And, I mean, we've seen a lot of propensity for people to trade players. People are more interested in getting an even game going than in, you know, arguing and then having 1 map pugs and having to repug and people getting mad and quitting and then you have to wait. People are willing to trade. I mean, we've had multiple times in the past couple weeks where we've seen, you know, captains get traded from one team to the other because that was what they figured would be a fair team. So, you know, I don't think people need to be afraid of captaining, and it's not like anyone's going to yell at them and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you picked such bad teams," you know, ban. So there's really no reason for any of that. And I think that, yeah, what we're doing with trying to emphasize more of these bans is just keeping things rolling, so that doesn't end up taking an hour and a half to get a pug started because, you know, 3 people that keep getting captain don't want to captain and they just quit and rejoin and quit and rejoin, and it just drags things out. It's like just pick a team, ask opinions, and get it played.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm glad you said something about that. The 1 map dead pug where, you know, it will happen sometimes. Teams will be off, and you won't necessarily know that teams are off. And what you'll see happen is one person, after they lose, you know, 8-4 or something, they say dead pug, and they go and repug. The problem with this is that whoever signed up for that current pug, they signed up to play 2 maps. So what we want to see happening, instead of dead pugging, trade players like Con was just talking about. Make sure you play the 2 maps, because if you don't, you dead pug after 1 map, there's already 3 or 4 people signed up. That means there's 3 or 4 people that signed up to play 2 maps that now get screwed out of, you know, 2 sequential maps after that. So they really get screwed out of 1 map, and they have to just kind of sit around. It happened to Ark just the other day. So just keep all that in mind, and, you know,
answer my question.
We're here to expand the community and have fun, not to, you know, not otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that, you know, like I said, he said happened to Ark the other day, and I think he actually decided to protest by occupying the pug server until he got kick voted.
Yeah, I think you guys were doing some hashtag Occupy CK4CTF or something. It's pretty funny. He actually got kick voted. I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, I was actually kind of curious what percentage of the vote it would take, because you know, I haven't seen it done in so long. But yeah, I mean, that's, you know, again a point of emphasis. People don't need to prolong the starting of pugs because they don't want a captain. I think that's really just the big takeaway from this, is that you're gonna get banned. That's all there is to it. And you know, extenuating circumstances, things happen. We had Danny, I think the other day, accidentally rage quit a pug by just closing his laptop before teams had been picked or something along those lines. So by the time he got downstairs, he realized he had actually quit the pug, lost his spot. So it sucked for him, but, you know, there's always extenuating circumstances. But just don't waste everyone's time. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious when it happens. So.
All right, so getting back then onto matches that we have coming up. We have a lot to cover. We basically got 5 matches that, in theory, should be happening by Sunday. Probably not going to, but we'll see. You know, hopefully we can get some scheduled within the next 4 or 5 days here. Maybe we'll have a big weekend this weekend of games. I've got the schedule pulled up, so yeah, I mean, first one we've got 5-minute feed versus Final Solution. That's going to be Marcos' team versus Linoleum's, and I know there's been some talk about 5-minute feed and whether or not they're actually going to be able to field teams now, because they've kind of been, like, having trouble, I guess, getting people to show up all at one time.
Yeah, definitely. I think Corp and Nell are the two people we've been talking about a lot. Although I did see on WhatsApp just today that, I mean, Marco's School Spot, Key, Fallacy, and Zax, they're on quite a bit. I mean, quite a bit. So I think what you're going to see with this team is they're just going to have to start playing matches. They're not necessarily going to be able to play with their top five. I've heard rumors of Marco's team trading like a Corp for a different team that might have a better schedule for him. So I don't know if something like that will happen. And then there's also been talk of people picking up some of the active free agents. While there aren't many free agents, some people we've seen around are Xenos, I believe. I think somebody was talking about Benko, maybe. Rick James, Hector, and Darth. I'm not sure who else we've seen around, but...
Yeah, I mean, those are, I think, the main guys that we've seen, at the very least, available in IRC. I mean, I don't know how much... You know, I don't know what their schedules are. Like, Hector is going to be European. He certainly pugs a decent amount. Maybe he can only... I mean, he puts in his availability here weekends, probably because that's whenever he's able to play late at night for him. But, I mean, we've seen teams, like, you have, what, 3 or 4 Europeans that are actually drafted. I mean, you got Danny, you got Sta, who else? But, you know, point being...
Sonic.
There you go, Sonic. I mean, yeah, you can work around schedules if need be. I think the key is that captains need to start talking to these free agents and seeing what their availability is, because, you know, you don't just want to assume that because they haven't been pugging a lot that they're not available. But anyway, that's one option they can put forth. And I know, like, Corp showed up the other day thinking he had a match, so I'm not sure what his schedule is, but he's shown that he's at least available at certain times. I don't know what his schedule is exactly. I know Nell's work schedule is basically leaving him only available really late at night, and I think that's the problem that they're having there. I will say this, I saw Spark, I believe, show up on IRC tonight, didn't he? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, on IRC, and I know I saw him talking. I don't remember if it was WhatsApp or IRC or both.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. He certainly exists in internet form. Whether or not he'll be, you know, around, active, available to play, or whatever the case may be, will be, you know, we'll have to just wait and see on that one. But at the very least, it's nice to see another person on this team that has, you know, had so much trouble getting 5 together. All of a sudden, have another person at least kind of come out of the woodwork. So hopefully that'll mean a match gets played there. The question, of course, then is who wins this one if it does get played, you know, so hopefully. And I think because of that activity level, I mean, I'm still looking at Marcos's team as one of those that was good on paper, but of course that paper includes Corp and Nell, who are both having trouble getting their schedules synced up with the team. So I think that's going to continue to hurt them. And I think, you know, if this match does get played with whatever 5 Marcos can field, I have to think that if Linoleum can get anywhere near his starting lineup, they're going to have a big advantage here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that I think really just because of the scheduling, that if Linoleum, like you just said, if he can put up his top 5 or 6, honestly, you know, even his 7th maybe, he actually has a pretty round team there. I think I'm going to go ahead and give them the win on this one. If Marco's team is able to field, you know, his top 5, then I think they would have a really good chance. But I think that is, I think we all are expecting that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say too, looking at Linoleum's roster, there were a couple of players that were, I don't know if question marks is the right word, but I was personally unsure of. I don't think I had played with 9 in years, and so I was a little concerned about that. And Rookie, you know, wasn't even sure if he was to show up. Both of them, I mean, Rookie's played pretty well, and then 9, I was actually very surprised with how effective his offense has been, and especially his timing. He's another one of those guys who has a sort of knack for picking up power-ups in mid without playing mid. You know what I mean? He'll keep a timing of things, and he'll time his offensive runs or attacks or whatever the case may be through the power-ups rather than holding mid and finding himself idle a bunch of the time. And that's a difficult skill set to find, and he's one that's actually shown that in recent pugs and matches.
Yeah, I think one of them that we actually casted together, I don't remember who the enemy team was, but I think we saw 9 2 or 3 times running the flag and actually scheduling grabbing the 100 shield in mid on virility. So I mean,
Right,
that is a really good skill set. You don't see a lot of people do that. But whether it was coincidence or not, he definitely made it happen. I think maybe 3 times during that match, and that's not easy to do. So you know, he's been playing really well.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would say my my closest comparison between him would probably be someone like Ark, as far as someone who plays a fully committed offensive role, but just has a tendency to modify what they're doing and their routes based on the power-ups and manage to keep all that sort of sorted in their head, which is kind of difficult to do when they're in such a fast-paced game like this.
Yeah, definitely. That's a unique skill set that not many people are. You're going to see that out of.
So then next game we got coming up is going to be 7th Degree Murder against Team Big. That's going to be Fro's team, and this is where I was getting at with DC. Sir Daniel Crampton had some internet issues last week, and I mean I think he was just getting ridiculous packet loss. I think he just recently moved, so I'm not sure if that was like a permanent thing, or I think it was his ISP that was there. And he has recently switched ISP, so his ping is not as ungodly low as it was. But from what he's told me, his packet loss is much more reasonable now, so he should be a factor again. He should be able to play, and of course, looking at Fro's team, that was his 4th, or was it 4th round? Actually, it's not in order on this side, I don't think. So yeah, I don't remember exactly which round pick he was, but certainly one of his starting defenders on there. So an important part of his team. Although, I will say that for Fro's team, we have seen No Aim No Moves become a little more active in pickup games lately. I don't know how active he had been on the side via scrims or just whatever, but we have seen him play some more pickup games and sort of getting back into the groove of 2K4, and so that's another sort of extension of their roster there that we've seen. And it kind of gives Fro 6 starters really if you look at the composition of their team there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that if he fields any of the above, being Fro, B-Banks, Blimpo, Corky, DC, or No Aim No Moves, the 2 I would just think would be switched out between the 2 would be either Corky or Fro, both as an offensive role, and then the other 4 playing is how probably I would captain it anyway. But definitely a really strong line. Like you said, Nanum's been playing more. He's been playing well, as I suspected at the beginning of this season. Blimpo has been playing too, as he always does well. And then, Banks and with DC back having good ping, they're going to definitely be able to field a strong line.
Yeah, and the one thing that I still think looking at this team is this is a very old school team. This is a very frag your way in and frag your way out type team. I mean, I think that's kind of how Fro runs offense. He's sort of old school with the flak and rockets. And it'll be interesting to see. I think this is one of those teams that, or is another one of those teams that can really manipulate map picks in certain ways that I think will do them well. I think this is actually one of those teams that would do well on a larger map like, November Orbital 2. I think that would play to these guys' strengths, and so we'll see what they decide to go with on that. Talking about their opponents though, Team Big, this is a team that is kind of a mystery to me. They've only played one match. We saw them split maps. Who was it in their week 1 match? But they won Anfractuous, which was their choice, and then they lost Maul, which was the other team's choice.
Yeah, Linoleum's
team. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But and that kind of surprised me because first, like I thought it would be the exact opposite in the match. When I first saw the screenshots, I thought, okay, well clearly Linoleum's team chose Anfractuous to leverage their offensive ability on a crazy offensive map, and clearly Team Big, leveraged their fragging ability on a wide open map like Maul, and it kind of went the other way around, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and I'm pretty sure we were talking about it earlier, that Bob's team picked Anfractuous, and the only thing I can think about that is, if I'm not mistaken, Big D or Vengance really likes that map. He self-proclaimed, Rocket Master, and that rocket is right there in front of each base. So I don't know if that was kind of their thinking on that, but yeah, they ended up losing that map. But that's right, isn't it?
Well, they ended up winning Anfractuous and losing Maul, because remember on Maul they had a disconnect, and I think that allowed them to force overtime, and then that allowed Linoleum to force overtime, and that was sort of the beginning of the disconnect I don't want to say controversy, but discussions, as there was no one around to pause that one, and so they kind of just were SOL in that situation. But yeah,
and like we said, you know, hopefully that we don't have to worry about that as much. If William or myself or whoever else, if there are other people are going to be admin, then we won't have that problem.
Yeah, and I mean, again, looking at Bob's roster one more time, I mean, these are all people other than Illusion, and I don't know what Element's status is. We watched the pickup game, or the scrims they played the other day, and Element was around for that and actually did pretty well despite not having a mic. But this is actually a more active roster than I expected. I wasn't sure how much these players would be around, but he's got a pretty decent plug-and-play roster where you've got 6 or 7 people you can sort of swap in and out. I still am concerned by their lack of flag running offense. This is still a very frag-heavy team, which, again, I say that, and it kind of surprised. I would have thought that they would have had trouble on a map like Anfractuous. But then again, Anfractuous is a map where one person can go in and frag their way out to at least mid, and then sometimes you can just win those team deathmatch battles. So I think this is a team that is another one that's going to be very. I think their advantages on certain maps versus others is going to be more varied than a lot of other teams. I wouldn't say this is as balanced of a team, but I think that they can be very dangerous on those bigger wide open maps. And the one thing to keep in mind, that means this team still has Maul in their bag. They can still pull out Maul against a team, and I think that there's a lot of teams that would have a very tough time dealing with the fragging ability on this roster.
Yeah, big time. Maul's going to be a big pick for them. I would have them as being the frag heavy. I would see them picking this or Maul against a team like Zyos, kind of how we picked Vault City against Zyos, as we thought we were really strong in that map. As far as who's to win this match, I mean, this just comes down to who's going to show up, honestly. I think if Bob's team fields his top 5, I think you're going to see a really, really good team. And as we said, the only person that we haven't seen really active on that roster is Illusion, if I'm not mistaken. But very frag heavy. If they can get some good pickups and keep flags moving, I think that they'll be very successful. I'm going to go ahead and pick, I'm going to say if Pro's team, you know what, I'm going to say they each team wins their map pick. That's how I'm going to go.
Yeah, that's how I'm going to have to go too. I mean, it's so hard this early in the season when every team still has the majority of the map list available at their disposal to choose. It's so hard to take a map from a team because everyone knows each other so well that you can really play sort of chess with this and choose your maps wisely. And I think later on in the league, as these maps start getting, teams' favorite maps start disappearing, you're going to see a little more variation, a little more intrigue. I think at this time, teams are going to be able to discuss with each other ahead of time enough, what maps do they want to look at, and really get in depth on ones. And that's really the smart thing to do. I mean, the advantage of only playing 2 map matches is you have a week-ish to talk about what you want. So let's say everyone decides what map they want to play 3 days ahead of time. That gives them 3 days to talk about one map, and so they don't have to prepare on a bunch of different maps. They can just make sure they win their one home map and then just try to steal one away from the enemy team. And that helps whenever you have rosters of players that may not be familiar with each other.
Yeah, definitely. Setting up, on certain maps, we talked about before, who's going to be the first person to grab that flag, who's going to be spamming the flag when the flag goes down. And then really just positioning, because, I mean, both of these teams have multiple players that can play either offense or defense, and if they know 3 days ahead of time, which hasn't happened much yet, we're still working on that with captains, I think. But if we were to know three or 4 days ahead of time what map you're definitely picking, then honestly you can maybe you get in a pug and you get your team to pick that map, and you tell that team, hey, I'm going to play offense because I'm going to be playing offense this Sunday on Maul or whatever map it may be.
I'm going to leave that as foreshadowing. The last 2 sentences you just said, just keep those in mind. I'm going to leave that as foreshadowing because right now I want to move to week 4. And I want to move right back in then to Team Big versus your team, Hot Snakes. And I'm finding it. I feel like Team Big is one of those potential-based teams where it's going to be hard for me to pick any given team for the most part that's going to be able to definitely beat them 2 maps. I think it'll really depend on, again, who shows up, like we said, but also what maps are played, because this is a team that can be really, really effective on certain maps and really, really, I believe, ineffective on others, depending on how they decide, how they sort of come together. Primarily on offense. Like I've said before, I think this is probably the best TAM team in the league. But whenever you can really put a lot of stress on their offense to come in and have synchronized attacks, I'm curious to see how they respond to that. You're looking at Big versus 7th week 3, and then Big versus Hot Snakes week 4. Arguably, two of the teams with the most experienced rosters as far as long-term capture the flag experience, and so I think they're both going to be similar matches for Big as far as what they're up against.
Yeah, I think you're right in that, and I think just looking at it, I think my early prediction, without going too much into it, would be that Hot Snakes versus Big team, that we would split maps. We would both win the map that we choose, and I know that we scrimmed them the first week, maybe the first or second week of Mlut, and I think we split maps there as well. So I think that's very likely.
Yeah, and again, I think Team Big, one of those teams that, as they run out of their favorite map choices, they may start to suffer later on in the league. But as it is, they've still kind of got their pick of the litter here, and they can do whatever manipulation they need to play a map that they are comfortable with. One thing we did see is that in some of their scrims, they seem to have had trouble with some of the newer maps. I don't know if some of their players maybe haven't been as active in recent times as we've been porting over these UT99 maps, your Virilities, your Bleaks, your Vault Cities, and so I'm curious if that will be a factor. But then again, they've had a lot of time and a few more weeks in between then and now to get used to these, and we've seen a lot of their players pugging, so maybe that won't be an issue. But I'm curious to see how that affects map choices for and against them. But one thing we should talk about. Poison Bagels did suffer a little bit of an injury last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he sliced. I don't remember what he was doing, but he was cutting something, and he sliced his hand open, or his finger open. He ended up getting stitches for that, didn't he?
Yeah, I remember, because it happened the same day that I had to take a coworker to there. I had to release a coworker to go to the hospital for slicing his hand open. So I guess that's just what was hot in the streets at the time. And PB, being on top of the trends like he is, decided to jump out in front on that one. But
yeah, he's always got to try to be the cool kid. So
well, from what I hear though, it sounds like he's back around and he's available to play, so it shouldn't affect this upcoming match, right?
Yeah, I don't think it will. I think he was pugging either last night or the night before. Somebody was asking him about it, facial, I think maybe. And he was saying that, yeah, it was fine. He could play with it now, and that he was going to take out the stitches himself in a few days or something. So I don't think it'll affect him at all at this point.
Yeah, and as I always say, I think Hot Snakes probably has the most well-rounded roster top to bottom. So losing an individual player in that team I don't think would hurt nearly as much as some of the other teams in this league, and certainly even a team like Team Big would have a little bit more drop off. Looking all the way down this roster, it's pretty solid top to bottom, but always helps to have a starting, well, I don't know, I guess offensive swing kind of players, typically what PB's been playing lately, right?
Yeah, he's been playing both offense and defense, but depending on the map, and we kind of switch it around, depending on that and who we have around that likes to play defense together. As I know, PB doesn't necessarily mesh with certain people on defense, just like, other people as well. I think as long as the match isn't like, oh shit, there's a match tonight, what you're probably going to see, for our team anyway, I can't speak for Bob's team, I know Facial is wanting to sit himself out and play more of an administrative captain for the rest of the season. He's been very open about that. I haven't seen Saint Sonicon around at all. Sta has been very active, but whenever we do have 5 other people, he asks to sit himself as it is, just maybe for the ping disadvantage that he does have. He wants us to be as competitive as possible. That being said, what you're probably going to see, assuming we can schedule a match out at least a day, is Arc, PB, Galgor, Fusion, and myself are probably going to be that's probably going to be kind of our staple line, assuming Facial keeps himself out of games.
And so with that, you're going to basically see Galgor as your anchor defender. I guess that'll be. I mean, Fusion defends on a certain specific map, so he's basically going to be an offensive role, I presume. And
yeah, what you're probably going to see is it'll be Galgor always on D, pretty much, no matter what. And then it'll be Galgor and Fusion if it's Vault City, probably. Otherwise, it'll be Galgor and either myself or Poison Bagels. And I usually let PB decide what he likes to do better on whatever specific map. And then what you'll see our team do is if I end up playing defense because he wants to play offense on that map, if I'm struggling, we'll switch it up really early. So it'll be PB and I kind of switching between offense and defense. But the others will play Fusion and Arc will almost always play offense.
Yeah, very versatile. That's sort of the advantage, as we once again we've talked about before. It's a very versatile team there, and it's nice to be able to switch things up just for the sake of it, because sometimes you're just not feeling it. And one thing, I don't want to get too in depth with this, but one thing I do want to mention with that that came to mind as I was watching some of these previous matches is that there's times when you're just not feeling a specific skill set. Like you might wake up one day and your rockets and link gun might be dead on, but your hit scan aim might just feel off. You might just be not feeling it that day. And there's certain positions that really lend yourself to using different weapons. And so being able to switch that up sometimes can be as simple as that, as one person is shooting better that day with one weapon and the other person is shooting better with another. And the ability to swap that out and not really lose anything and be able to adjust to sort of daily variations is going to be very helpful for your team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't really prefer either D or O. And what happens, and it's happened not only in matches but pickup games lately, as PB is constantly pugging, as I am as well, and Galgor and whatever. When we end up on the same team, we'll do that. We'll practice that. Where it also depends on how the server is feeling at the time. Sometimes IP2, which we use mostly right now, sometimes it feels amazing, and then other times for me, I mean, I'm lagging around, and I've kind of bitched about it a couple different nights when it's just been absolutely awful. So what'll happen is if I start on defense and the map's feeling sluggish and I feel like I can't really trans or whatever's going on with my connection, I'll switch up with PV and I'll start running. At least I can lag around with a flag and spam some rockets, and kind of make myself as effective as possible. So that's what you'll definitely see Hot Snakes doing.
Yeah, running that sort of amoeba formation. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the next match. You're looking at Wu versus Sassy, and this is why I wanted to foreshadow that a little bit, because this match is likely, according to Killer posting on the forums, likely going to occur this Sunday. I don't know how likely, but he seems to think that that's the what's going to happen. These have been two teams that have been fairly consistent with playing their matches. Although one thing I wanted to mention about the Pugs is that we've been seeing Killer and Failsauce picking each other in Pugs a lot. We've been seeing them running offense a lot together in pickup games. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or if they've been actively doing this to sort of build their chemistry, or if maybe they just enjoy playing with each other. Two, again, of the more offensively aggressive players that we have right now, so I could see that being the case as well. But I'm curious if that's something that they've been actively doing to try to sort of get practice in for their MLUT team.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of all the above, what you're talking about. I think not only do they enjoy playing together a lot, I think that they're definitely, I mean, you definitely see them, if one's captain or the other is captain, they'll pick, each other, usually first pick, actually, to make sure that they are on that same team. And then I think another thing with that is just, I mean, there's a number of people that don't love Failsauce, I think, and so what you're seeing is Killer and him put each other on the same team and kind of trying to make sure one of them is captain so that they can not necessarily play with somebody that doesn't love them and won't necessarily play to their fullest with them. So I think that's another factor in the way that they've been picking Pugs lately.
Yeah, it definitely takes a very specific team composition to work with those ultra-aggressive offensive players. But, looking at Killer's roster here, they've kind of... I mean, I guess we'll talk first about Zealous, XDBS. He's been having internet issues. I know him and Killer have been talking. Killer actually posted on the forums recently where he's trying to get the agreement of captains and administrators to actually drop Zelos altogether from the league and then replace him with someone of more or less equal values. And Zelos was, I believe, his first-round pick, right?
Yeah, Zealous was his first pick, which I think it was a good pick. I don't think any of us saw him having internet issues, as he really wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, having any internet issues before the season started. I think it was a good pick. I think the person that they were talking about getting to play for him was Perfection. And with that, Perfection plays a very similar mid, I believe, type position. So that would be a high fragging mid position. So I think they're trying, Killer's at least trying to argue that that would be a fair trade. That being said, I mean, now that I'm an admin, I'm sure that I'll have some sort of a vote on this, how this happens, and like you said, captains as well. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I'm gonna have to talk to Linoleum more about it. On one hand, I think that it would be a decent switch. I think they're similar skilled players. But on the other hand, I mean, if Perfection wanted to play in this Mlut tournament, I don't understand why he didn't at least even add himself. Even the last day, there was 3 more signups that were allowed to go in for the draft. So, one of those, it may just be if you snooze, you lose. And I mean, that's when Killer picked his team. That's something that he needed to be thinking about. And if he didn't talk to Zealous beforehand and didn't know that maybe something could come up, then I mean, sometimes it's just kind of SOL. So I mean, we'll see what happens with it though.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you on that one too. As someone, I'm listed as an admin. I don't really have any authority, but I'm sort of a consultant. Is how I've been listing myself for the Mlut season, and I'm basically in the same boat in that, hypothetically, I do think that would be an okay swap out as far as trying to figure out what would be, what are even players. But whether or not I like philosophically that going on, I mean, we've had other players come out of the woodwork who aren't, who haven't been able to join this season. So, I don't necessarily think we want to get into adding players and people being picked up, mid-season, unless we want to do. And I actually haven't thrown this idea out, although I've been thinking about it. If we can get enough new free agents, like at least half a dozen, maybe what we can do is a supplemental draft, or maybe even work on some kind of waiver system, which, if you get into how actual sports leagues do it, they do it based on things like salary cap and record, and they give the teams that are most in need the first crack at replacing players with another or whatever, and then you just go down the list. So it's almost similar to what we do with our original draft, but you would do that with the teams. And so the idea being it would help teams that really need it bolster their roster and be competitive, whereas it wouldn't necessarily allow a team that's already got a full effective roster to just pick up one more person and deny the other team. So I think that if we can come up with a way to do that, that might be a little more sort of philosophically balanced way to do it, because at least then every team would have a chance to modify their roster or fill in gaps that they might have. But again, I think that wouldn't just be a one-for-one player swap out. That would be a case where we need a handful of people to sign up or to at least become active as free agents. And I think that might be doable. But these are discussions that we'll probably be looking into within the next few days, especially now that Linoleum is back around and has joined us back in the 21st century with some electricity.
Yeah, definitely. I do I like that idea, and I think it's something we need to kind of mess with. And this is the problem with adding, somebody like Perfection, where maybe it is a good switch. Once you add that person, it's almost like these other people that want to play. Well, why don't they get to be added? Because they're no different in this situation on being, a late add to the teams. And what you don't want to see happen is all of a sudden you add, and instead of if you were not to do a supplemental draft, which I think is a decent idea, something like that anyway, what you'll see happen is, for instance, like Bob's team, where I haven't seen Illusion at all. Illusion, was listed as a 356 salary, which I mean I don't even know. I haven't seen the person play in forever. But that being said, we haven't seen him around. So if you add, let's say, 6 to 10 players, is it just whoever gets picked first? Because Bob could just log in, pick up, a $900 player if that's who ends up joining, and then all of a sudden you swap a 900 for a, 350.
Right. You would definitely need
don't want to be happening.
You would need to regulate somehow the order in which players become available. Maybe even go through like a waiver wire, like you do for free or for cut players in sports leagues, and give every team, within a certain order, a chance to pick them up if they wish. There are ways to do this if we want to go through with it, but it's just something we're going to have to figure out. I do agree that it kind of opens a little bit of a can of worms, just allowing individual players to swap in and out, sort of while ignoring other players and other teams that have similar concerns.
Yeah, and I mean, that being said, Mlut as a whole, if I'm not mistaken, especially in 2K4, has been one of those leagues that are pretty sound when it comes to sticking to the rule book. And so, I mean, there's going to definitely be a lot of talk on how this gets handled or dealt with.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a lot of that between WhatsApp discussions, IRC, forum posts, and all that in the next few days. But that's something that's ongoing, so I want to let people know about that. That said, I will say this: you look at Killer's team. I was a little bit curious how how their team would shake out, and it looks like we've basically seen Imwalt step up and become a solid starter for them now. I know when the draft first took place, he, I think, had just sort of returned, if I'm not mistaken, and so there was a little bit of a question mark about how active he would remain and how well he would be able to get back, shake off the rust and all that. But I know he's sort of stepped in as a solid starter for them, and I'm not sure. Did I see Toggle play the other day? Did I see him online?
Yeah, Tuggle's been here and there. He'll play, like, I think I'll see him play 1 or 2 nights, and then won't see him for a week and a half, and then, if I'm not mistaken, isn't he one of the just players that plays a lot of League? They seem to be on a lot, but don't necessarily play 2K4.
I don't think he plays with the group that's 5-minute or feed, but he might be a legal player. I'm not sure. But that said,
Yeah.
you're looking at the starting lineup for Killer there. You basically have Killer Fail Sauce offense, Dark Virus, and Imwalt defense, and I believe Met in their last match was their 5th. So they've kind of solidified this starting 5, but then you've got Chicken Toggle and Zelos that I don't think any of them are particularly. I don't know. I'm not sure about Toggle. I've seen him around. Not sure how much he's around. But so you're basically looking at 2 players and a Chicken and Zelos who effectively are inactive, and I think that's why he's looking right now at either picking up a free agent or trying to figure out what he can do, because his 5 is pretty solid. And they're all very active, but the question is, what happens when he can't field those 5? I think that's that's the problem that we're gonna need to see solved by them, one way or another.
Yeah, when I've seen Toggle play, it seems like, and I'm assumed just because of inactivity, he's been picked last or second to last in most pugs, and that's typical for anybody that's going to come back to the community. That being said, he's been playing decent. I haven't seen him do super spectacular things. But if I'm not mistaken, he's been playing an offensive role, getting some good pickups, and he's not a horrible fragger. So, if you don't get that top 5 to play, obviously, I guess Zelos is effectively done at this point. Is that correct?
That's the impression that I get. I haven't talked to him personally. That seems to be what Killer believes. So, we'll see if there's any more clarity there.
So, if that's the case, I would really like to just see him play and we not have to deal with any of this stuff. But, if he were there to play, he would definitely be in that top 5. I would assume Met would be the person that would sit in that case. But if he is, like you said, if he's gone, Chicken, I haven't seen it all, other than, he talks in IRC some, but I've seen him, pug once or twice maybe since the season has started. And then, Toggle, I don't think he's a bad sub by any means. But I think they're going to have a tough time if they can't figure out something where their number 1 pick can play. They're going to have a difficult season, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think that would be true for any team. Especially you look at who they're going up against. Likely this Sunday would be Team Sassy, who is undefeated and looking very, very strong right now. Like I said last week, I think I find it very hard to pick any team to beat Team Sassy. However, the one thing I will give, playing with Flare, Killer's team, we'll call them Killer's team, is they do have the most aggressive, high pressure offense of any team. And so they're one of the few teams that I really think could disrupt the defense of Sassy, which is going to be Chowie and Zeos, which is arguably the best defensive tandem that we have in this Mlut right now. With a really, really aggressive team and a really disruptive team, like Killer and Fail Sauce, I don't actually know which maps they still have available, but on maps like Anfractus, they can be so difficult to keep track of. Even a map like Grindel Keep, where 2 defenders are going to have a really hard time keeping the flag home, and so it's going to put a lot of pressure on them to be in position. I think if you can get players like especially Zeos, who's a very, very efficient fragger on defense, if you can get players like that moving around and having to chase you around the map, you can diminish their effectiveness because they've got that translocator out instead of just blasting you with shock and LG and all that. So I would say that's probably my team that I believe would be most likely to disrupt Sassy's defense. We'll put it that way. Would be Team Wu. So I could see them splitting maps on this match. It would not surprise me if this could end up being the only map loss for Sassy this season.